Welcome to DIY Leaky Balcony Repair. If you're watching this, you've probably already had some quotes on getting your leaky balcony repaired, and you know that it's going to be expensive. Expensive with money, but also it's going to take quite a bit of time. So I'm going to step you through how to repair the balcony yourself for very inexpensive in comparison. Now what we're going to be looking at, because we're not going to be removing the tiles, we're actually going to be going on top to repair the balcony. We're going to need a clear waterproofing membrane or a flexible membrane to go over the top. So we're going to be using Remedial Membranes clear waterproofing membrane, and we're using that because all decks leak due to movement. So we need to have a product that's going to enable additional movement in the future without leaking again. And that's why we're not going to be using epoxies or sealants, as they're rigid products. Okay, so I'm going to break this up into 4 sections. We're going to start with inventory, second cleaning, third preparation, and then application. So you can actually do this in stages if you need to, but I encourage you to listen to the whole bit before you start. Okay, so what are you going to need? You're going to need Remedial Membranes clear waterproofing part 1 and part 2, depending upon your coverage, is the quantities that you'll need to order. You'll need to order the Sidal joint adhesive, an applicator gun. You'll need a plastic scraper, a paintbrush, a nap roller and pole, a paint tray, matching grout if you're missing any grout, and then for the cleaning you'll probably need a cleaning agent. We use chlorine, but whatever you're going to use, and if you don't have a massively bad leak, then also a high pressure hose to clean off the chlorine once you've scrubbed it. Okay, so that's what we'll need. Now let's get into how we're going to clean it. Okay, so then we're going to go and clean the balcony. Now some of these balconies may not have been cleaned for years, and it's key that we get a proper clean, because once the membrane goes on top of the tiles, it's a permanent situation. So we need to make sure it's absolutely spick and span before we apply. So we use cleaning agents. We use a 1-to-1 ratio for chlorine and water, and that will kill all the mold and all the grease and the grime, but it actually just bleaches it. So then we're going to need to scrub the surface or use a high pressure hose. So if you've got a big leaking problem and it's going into an existing dwelling rather than like a carport, you may not have the option of using the high pressure hose, and you may just have to use the scrubbing brush and some sponges to remove the agent afterwards. But while you're going around the balcony and you're cleaning it, just keep in mind to look at the standard of the balcony, if there's any missing grout, if there's any loose grout, tiles popping up, so because later on in the next section we're going to actually go back around and replace it. Okay, so if you are going to use the agent that we use or suggest, the chlorine and water, we suggest that you just do a sample area test before you start, maybe the day before, just to ensure that the chlorine doesn't stain or bleach the tiles. Okay, let's go into the preparation. Okay, now with the deck being 100% clean, we're going to go around and have a look for loose grout. If there's any loose grout, we're going to replace that with as close a match as possible, because we don't want the balcony to be too patchy once it's completed. But if there is any loose grout around a particular tile, just tap that tile if it's drummy, and if it's coming up, we're going to have to replace that or put it back down. But before we do, we just want to feel the substrate. Now I'm not talking about the adhesive that applies to the tile and the substrate, but rather the substrate below it. If that's soft and spongy, then it's quite possible that the water has gone down and started to rot the substrate, and you no longer can do a repair, but rather you have to do a complete redo. So at that stage you probably want to get a professional in to give you some advice. If your substrate's intact and just wet, that's fine. We're going to use the Sidal joint adhesive on the back of the existing tile and push it back down, and just make sure that the tile is flush or the same height as all the other tiles. You don't want to create a tripping hazard. Then grout it in using the matching grout, and as the silicone or the joint adhesive is a neutral cure, you don't need to wait for that to dry before grouting. And if you're wanting to hurry this process along, you can use like a heat gun or a hairdryer to dry that grout out. Once all the tiles have been replaced and the grout's now in place and it's looking quite good, I want you to look around and try and identify your expansion joints. Expansion joints are actually used by, put in by silicone, and they'll tend to be approximately every 4 meters on your balcony. They're there so that when the sun heats up the tile and it grows during the day, and then at night time it actually shrinks, that movement can be taken up with those expansion joints. If they're not there, they need to be there. So if you need to cut them in, you'll need to watch our cutting in expansion joints video, which is quite simple, not a big deal, but it needs to be done prior to moving forward, as it can make the difference between a leaky balcony and not one. Okay, so just keep in mind they're meant to be every 4 square metres. Okay, once they're in, we're going to have a look over the deck, wipe off any smears to make sure it's 100% dry. And if there's any dust on there, we want to do a quick dry wipe on the surface, because we don't want to have dust separating the membrane from the tile. Okay, then we're going to move into application. Okay, so now before we apply, we know that the balcony is 100% clean, and we know that all the surfaces are intact before we start applying the membrane. So we need to get the part 1 and part 2, and usually the part 2 has enough room to be mixed straight into the part 1. The installation guide recommends a mechanical mix of 5 minutes, but really we just need to make sure that the 2 materials combine and then create a constant membrane thickness. It will slightly thicken with the additive of part 2. And then while that's sitting before starting, we're going to go and get the Sidal joint adhesive, and we're going to apply that quite thick over all the expansion joints. And any areas that might have had cracking issues in the past, the Sidal has a great 750 times movement on the product. So, you know, this is great, and we can use it for areas that are cracking or prone to issues. And as it's clear, apply clear, and then we're applying the membrane over the top of it. You don't have to be too neat with it. We just put it on, and then we're going to flatten it with the flat scraper, and then we're going to roll over the top of it. So just go for your life, put it on quite thickly, and then once we've done all the expansion joints and the cracking prone areas, we're actually going to go and put this joint adhesive anywhere where there's a junction between a vertical and a horizontal surface. So at the back of the walls, any balustrades, any supporting membranes, they all need to have a Sidal joint adhesive all around them. Then once that's complete, we're going to go and get our paintbrush and paint up 100ml from up the wall and on the floor. We're actually going to roll the majority of the balcony, but this is just to make sure that the areas that are crucial, like our corners and edges, that they're 100% waterproof properly and that we're not missing out by rolling them. So we're going to go around and do the entire perimeter before we start with the roller. Once that's done, what we want to make sure of that we're not getting any ponding. So when the product comes together and we're looking at on vertical surfaces, it can tend to come down and then pond in one section, and you'll have like a whitening effect. What we want to do is just wipe that out. We don't want to have any whitening on there because that will increase the dry time, and if it's too thick, may not even go clear. So we want to make sure we can wipe them out and then let them go clear on their own. Once that's finished and we're happy with the finish of the joints or the edging, we're going to go and get the nap roller, pour some product into the paint tray, and then roll in one direction, usually starting from the furthest point and working back to your exit point. And we want to make sure we just do one direction, and then when we come to the next one, we're going to do the opposite direction. This ensures that we don't have any areas that don't get covered. Okay, work your nap roller out, apply the product to the nap roller quite liberally, and then just move it around on the surface, working all the way back. Now what we should have is a bit of a milky finish to the product once we've done the first coat. Now we need to wait for that milky finish to go clear, and then once it's clear, you can touch the surface. If the surface is still tacking, or where you get product touching on your finger as well as on the ground, then it's not dry yet, and we actually have to wait for that to be completely dry before we go back over it. Okay, so with the first coat being complete and now dry, we're going to start on the second coat. But before we actually start, if this is the time where you're going to put in any anti-slip, then we need to pour it into the product and mix it through before we start putting application. And then we just apply the product as we did in the first coat, and there's no delay for using the additional non-anti-slip application. So we've done the first coat, now we want to remove our shoes before we start with the second coat. The Membrane is actually full cure in 7 days, so we need to treat it with heaps of respect, and we're going to do that by removing our shoes. Okay, then we can go back over and start as in we did with the first application. Start with the edges, walk all the way around, 100 ml up, 100 ml down, making sure that the product's not ponding and is completely clear. And then we're going to use the nap roller in the opposite direction. So if we did first up and down, then we want to do side to side with this application, and work from the end, from the top to the exit point, and you're complete. Now, if you seem to have a lot more product left over, either you had less coverage than quantity of the product ordered, or you've gone a bit thinner than a normal application, just go ahead and do a third or fourth coat here. The product needs to be applied quite thin, but there's no limit to how many coats you actually do, and the more coats you do, the stronger the product, the stronger the membrane. So take your time to do it really well, and then you're going to get the benefits of having a balcony that doesn't leak for a long time. Excellent. So if you come to any hiccups, or if you're doing any prep work and you need any questions answered, Remedial Membranes actually has a hotline, a free hotline that you can ask questions and get their feedback from professionals. Excellent. Now once you've finished your balcony, just make sure you read the customer care instructions so that you do look after it for a long time in the future. Things like not putting pot plants and furniture on until the membrane has cured after 7 days. Just practical suggestions for care. Okay, excellent. You can watch more of our ads like leaky shower repairs and other things at remedialmembranes.com.au. Thank you.